Welcome back to another episode. This episode is also done in the spirit of epilepsy awareness. I feel that there's nothing more impactful than speaking with a patient or a parent of a patient who is living with epilepsy. That is exactly what we accomplished during this episode. We speak with a parent of a young patient who is living with epilepsy. You'll hear about the diagnosis, some of the struggles, things that go along with this diagnosis, and finally you'll hear about the triumph. And although I'll never know how many people this helps, I really hope that this will help someone who might be feeling downtrodden with their journey with epilepsy. Hopefully this will brighten your day, and hopefully this will be an inspiration. Let's get into it. Well, good morning. Thanks you guys for being here. So,
good morning.
This series that we're doing, it's all about epilepsy awareness, and it's done in the spirit of epilepsy awareness. I go ahead and put our disclaimers out there that this does not in any shape, form, or fashion replace your interactions with your healthcare providers. It might be good to take some notes and go talk with your healthcare provider after you've heard this to see if any of these types of things might apply to you in your situation. But this morning we'll go ahead and get down to introductions. So my co-host is Kim. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kim. I'm a nurse. An epilepsy nurse. I've been an epilepsy nurse for almost 30 years. I am very passionate about epilepsy, and I feel very honored, Dr. Moorhill, that you asked me to be a part of this podcast.
Awesome.
And I'm looking forward to today's session.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Kim, for being here. I think it's great with this type of interaction to hear the point of view from all levels of healthcare providers. So having you as charge nurse on here with all of your experience was really important this morning. And I'm Dr. Moorhill. I'm the chief of epilepsy. And, this morning we're going to talk with a parent of a patient who's going through epilepsy, and we're going to talk about their family's journey with epilepsy and kind of how all that got started. So Matthew, if you want to kind of just introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So good morning, everybody. My name is Matthew Smith. I'm the parent of a wonderful 3.5-year-old that you may catch glimpses of throughout this episode or hear, Bluey playing in the background. But my 3.5-year-old, at the bright age of 1, was diagnosed with epilepsy. I've worked with Dr. Moorhill and Kim in our hospital here, Dr. Park as well, mainly. But excited to share my journey, share my story, and everything else that comes along with it.
Awesome. So I guess just to set the stage, can you tell me about your child's diagnosis? Obviously, we are not going to use any health information, but just generally your point of view as a parent, kind of how that came about, how you first learned about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So our story, I guess, really can start from when Turner was just 1 year old. We were in COVID. I don't want to say lockdown, but we were quarantined at home because my wife at the time actually had it. And he was eating dinner, sitting in his high chair one night, and we kept noticing his head bobbing. And we were thinking, oh, he's just tired, or, he may just, have a little bit of a bug or something, or we were even concerned that he may have COVID because she had it. Over the next few days, we noticed it more and more, and sent a picture off to our a video off to our pediatrician. She immediately texted us back and said, you need to call this number and get him into pediatric neurology pretty quickly. So fast forward a couple weeks later, we had an EEG and showed seizure activity as an EEG. We were whisked down to Dr. Park's office to talk to him. They did an MRI a few days later on him and discovered that Turner had a pocket of scar tissue in his brain that was causing his epilepsy. Long story short, we started connecting the dots with Dr. Park. My wife was induced a couple weeks early because Turner stopped moving in utero, and we later discovered that he was actually sitting on his umbilical cord, and that's what caused him to have a stroke in utero, caused the scar tissue, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the quick down and dirty story of it. But I mean, it's our story, and we're living it every single day.
Right.
Yeah. So Matthew, I think that's awesome that you are so proactive in doing a video recording, because that is so important with head drops, because oftentimes we'll bring patients in and we often don't capture those head drops. So the fact that you had a video, I encourage all parents that suspect that these could be seizures to try to capture these on video. That was great. That's the first step in getting a diagnosis.
And I'll say one thing too, as a parent, if you ever have any questions, never be scared to pick up the phone and call a physician. We're very fortunate that our pediatricians, are friends. Clovelyn, that works in Dr. Park's office, is, I have her on speed dial every single day. But never feel like you're asking too many questions, that you're bugging your healthcare providers, because, in the long run of things, that's what helped us, and we noticed this and we said, hey, something's not 100% right, and we just asked the question, and of course it morphed into this. But never be scared to just ask those questions.
Right. That is an excellent point about the video, for sure. There have been papers actually on the use of video and diagnosis of people who have epilepsy. And the specificity of a video is really, really high in the hands of somebody who treats patients who have epilepsy. So that probably really helped you to get a quick diagnosis. It sounds like this went really, really fast.
It did. It was, if you ever get that feeling when you watch a movie and it's like they're walking down a hallway and all the sounds are muffled and you're just kind of going through a journey. That's what it felt like for the first couple of weeks for my wife and I. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't know what was going to be next. We didn't know, what was going to happen on a day in, day out basis. We didn't know if this was going to morph into a grand mal seizure at any moment.
Right.
But, at the same time too, we were very fortunate that our physicians and our healthcare providers helped us every single step along the way. And, nowadays we look back at it and joke, but I will never forget, we walked into Dr. Park's office and he was pulling up the scans and everything to show us what was going on, and he put up a scan and we kind of looked at it and we were both thinking at the same time, oh my God, our son has a brain tumor. And Dr. Park turned around and saw us just white as ghost. He looked at us and goes, this is not a brain tumor, don't panic. So but yeah, it was just that weird feeling of, we were kind of going through the motions, and a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of you find yourself walking around the house and thinking out loud. And we look back on it now and just laugh, because we were so shell-shocked that we didn't know what to do.
Yeah. So Matthew, I'm curious, when Turner was born and you knew that he had the stroke in utero, did any of the healthcare providers talk to you about the possibility of him having seizures?
So we didn't know that he had a stroke in utero until he had his MRI, and then we started piecing the puzzle, putting the pieces together. When Turner was born, he did spend about 48 hours in the neonatal unit, just on oxygen and things like that. Our nurses and everybody just said, oh, he's got wimpy white boy syndrome, as they call it. We didn't think anything of it. And, time progressed and he started to develop. We, saw these and it ended up being that. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the journey of a parent walking through, like you said, you're like, is this my life? How do I deal with this? What does this mean for the family? What does this mean for him? I'm sure you must have asked yourself all those questions.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's tough, and it. I think it's one of those things that the more and more that Harley and I talk about it, the more and more we realize that that we were put in this situation because we can handle it. Um, you both know Turner. You both have seen him in and out of the hospital. We've gone here, there, and everywhere for him, and done scans and all types of things. But at the end of the day, he's just a happy 3.5-year-old. If he was home right now, he'd be out in the front yard hitting tennis balls for my dog. So,
Yeah.
he's a normal kid. He just happens to have epilepsy.
Yeah.
I think it's very important to continue to treat them as normal kids too. Right?
Oh yeah, 100%. I
Yeah.
agree. Nothing's ever slowed him down. We have this diagnosis. We have, I'm sure we'll touch on it later. We've done a lot of things for him. But at the end of the day, he's still a normal kid. He's happy as a clam. He, came running into our bedroom this morning and dive bombed me like Hollywood Hulk Hogan. So, I mean, you can't beat it.
That's great.
I love that. I love that. Well, I guess, so in terms of his daily life and routine, you wouldn't say, I mean, he probably knows that he goes and sees Dr. Park and maybe has his occasional visit at the hospital. But for him, it's probably becoming normal.
Yeah. We've done a lot. And between MRIs and EEGs, and we spent a week in the epilepsy monitoring unit, the EMU, just to try to catch seizures, which was funny because he actually went a whole week without having a seizure while we were in the EMU, which was mind blowing. Kim, because you were there.
I was, which is why it's good to have the video.
Exactly.
Yes.
We've gone to Orlando and done a MEG scan. We've, he's had his surgery now at this point. Dr. Wynn did it at the Children's Hospital of Georgia. We've gone through a lot, but at the same time, he is just a happy kid. Again, we don't know if he realizes that something's different in him. He knows that, I think he knows that sometimes his head hurts when it maybe shouldn't sometimes. But at the same time too, I don't think he doesn't view himself as any different than anybody else.
So I guess in terms of, medications now to surgery, because there are going to be patients and parents who are listening to this who are at various points along the continuum. Is that a dog?
Yeah, it's Nugget actually barking at something.
That's okay. I'll go back.
But yeah.
I'll go back and say that again, just because I don't know what the audio is going to sound like. So I was just saying, I guess there's going to be parents of kids who are at various points in this journey. So you've gone from medications now, and now medications plus surgery. So it sounds like you all must have received a diagnosis of drug-resistant epilepsy.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about drug-resistant epilepsy also, because I think it's important for patients living with epilepsy and the parents of somebody living with epilepsy to kind of walk through that journey and realize that there are still more options. That you haven't hit a brick wall just because the medications aren't taking things down to zero. So let's just take a moment and walk through that thought process.
Yeah. So, when Dr. Park finally told us, we initially started Turner on Keppra and CBD and clobazam and all these different medications, and I mean, some of them I still forget what they are, to be honest with you. He was very open with us and said, this isn't going to be fixed with medication. And I think that was one of the best things for us, is hearing this. He said we can reduce it and help him with medication, but eventually it's going to be a surgical procedure. Now, for the parents and people that are out there that, are going through the same situation that we went through, I go back to what I said earlier of don't ever be afraid to ask. Because one of the things that we saw as parents is Turner had a really bad reaction behavior-wise to Keppra. A lot of kids do, from the research that I've done, and I know that you both have known this as well. And when we went to Dr. Park and said, "Hey, can we please put him on something different than this? This isn't our kid anymore because he's so different with his attitude and everything." And he said yes. And knowing that it's not going to be fixed with medication, like you said, Dr. Moorhill, that is not the end all be all. There's so many procedures and there's so many resources out there to help, whether it's a child, whether it's an adult, whatever it is, with this. And from our point of view, we were terrified to say, okay, we're going to go in and do brain surgery on a 3-year-old. That was something that we as parents had to sit down and really think about and say, is this going to be the be-all, fix-all? And what was not only difficult on us as well is we're very fortunate to have a wonderful children's hospital right in our backyard. But we knew that there could be resources or programs or surgical options elsewhere. So we struggled with, do we go to a Texas Children's? Do we go to a Cleveland clinic? Do we go across the country to do this surgical procedure? And at the end of the day, we stayed home and did it. But going, kind of making this full circle and going back to what I said earlier, don't ever be afraid to ask the questions of what can I do? What resources are out there? Is it a medication? Is it a surgical procedure? Is it a this? Is it a that? Just because a doctor comes to you and says, this isn't going to be solved with medication, it is not the end of everything. There are other ways to combat this and to improve somebody's quality of life.
Right.
Yeah. I think it's important, too, to have a healthcare provider that's honest and tells you that these medications are not going to cure your child. I think that honesty is very important, especially for the parents' expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. And when Turner was having his seizures, especially in the start, we were seeing, 5, 6, 7, 8, episodes, as we called him, a day. And each one of his episodes, because of the type of epilepsy he has, we were seeing anywhere from 25 to 40 head drops per episode. And that's scary as a parent. And you sit down and you think to yourself, why is this not working? What can we do different? And you start doing your research and everything. And it gets scarier as you do your research, to be honest with you, because you start reading things and not knowing everything, and then you're down a rabbit hole. But yeah, I think exactly what you said, Kim. Having a healthcare provider that was very open and very honest with us as parents was extremely helpful. And there's days that I still pick up the phone and call Cleveland because I don't want to bother Dr. Park and say, hey, I have a question about XYZ. This is what we're seeing. This is what we're, is this okay? Is this not okay? Those type of things. And, just to have that resource has been a godsend, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think the quality of life part of it is really important too, right? Because every patient's going to have, and every patient's family, they're going to have different goals. And sometimes 0 seizures may not be the goal as things go along. Sometimes you just want to get things down enough so that the person can continue to function. Obviously, we shoot for 0 if we can, but sometimes that's not the reality. But you can still give meaningful, impactful improvement to the quality of life, which allows the parents to be able to stay at work and, earn a living. It allows the child or the adult to be able to, carry on with their everyday life too. So that's really important. So I guess what type of support other than, your access to the healthcare providers have you found to be helpful during this journey? Have you found support in other methods or in other places?
Yeah. So outside of Turner's epilepsy, he has some developmental delays, and he was recently put on the autism spectrum. A lot of our resources and care is with our healthcare providers. We have a wonderful rehab team with Kate, our speech therapist, and Susan, our occupational therapist. One of the things that we went out and did is join epilepsy Facebook groups, just talking with other parents whenever we see that somebody has a question. We bounced a lot of things off the group at Texas Children's Hospital because we were considering doing surgery there. But like I said, we stayed home. I think all the things that we did was super beneficial, but I think it goes back to what you're saying, Dr. Morehill. We're very fortunate to have such a tight-knit care team that, we can ask them anything and they're going to answer us. And Turner just started ABA therapy. They've been wonderful with him. But I think too, just going back to our care team and saying, hey, we have a question, and never being afraid to just ask that question. They're never too busy or a question's too simple for them to answer. So.
Yeah. I know as a healthcare provider, when we have patients that are candidates for surgery, the first question oftentimes that a parent will ask me is do you know a parent that I can talk to that's been through this? I think it's invaluable to have someone that has gone through the exact same thing. Parents need to know that they're not alone. And they want to talk to someone who's been in their shoes. They want to hear the outcome of your child, no matter what that is, because they just need someone to understand how they're feeling. And as healthcare workers, I think we try to provide that, but there is nothing like talking to someone who has lived it firsthand. And so
I definitely agree with you there, Kim. I think Turner's situation was a little bit different, just because of, I think, where his area of his brain that was compromised was located. When we first met with our surgeon, Dr. Corey Wynn, I think one of the things that gave us the reassurance to stay home is his confidence in it. And when we sat down in his office the first time, and he had all the scans at his fingertips and everything, and he looked at us both and he said, "This is no problem." And we were like, everybody's been telling us along the way, like, this could be really complex. This could be, we don't know if this is going to be the best outcome. All these things that kind of created doubt in our brains. And then to have a surgeon walk into the room and be so confident and so, just even keel and honest with us helped along the way. So, but no, I definitely agree. As a parent, we talk to others. As part of the group, we talk to parents and people that have gone through not maybe an epilepsy surgery but other brain surgeries at our hospital. We it sounds cheesy, but we read reviews on doctors and did things like that, and at the end of the day, we knew we were in the best place, and we had all the confidence in the world. So
that's good.
I smiled when Kim said that it's important for people to hear that lived experience, because that's really the reason that we wanted to do this is, in our epilepsy monitoring unit, we have rocking chairs, and I often sit down in those rocking chairs inside the patient's room and talk with them. But there's going to be times when there's people going through things that we could just say, just look at this video. You want to know what this is like? This patient's parent has shared their story. Just go check out this video. And I think that is by far the most impactful thing that we could give to a parent going through this experience, even more so than what the doctors say, because this is your baby, right? This is your kid. And, so thank you so much for sharing. This is really good.
I think parents need to feel that they're not alone.
Yeah, that's very important. Because it's definitely a journey, right? Like you get this diagnosis and, you kind of describe yourself going through slow motion, but then it just keeps going. There's more things. What's around that corner? Okay, I started this medicine. I thought we were going to be good. Now we're not. What's around that other corner? And so I think walking through all of that is just so important for parents.
Yeah, and I think what, made it even more difficult for Harley and I when we went through this is myself was a congenital heart kid at the Children's Hospital of Georgia. When you have something like a heart, you do echoes. When this measurement gets too high or too low, you go do surgery. For something like epilepsy, there's so many medications, there's so many different kinds, there's so many points along the way that, okay, when do we intervene surgically? Is Turner's brain developed enough? Is it not developed enough? Is it going to recuperate? All those questions, out there that we had, we found answers for them. You just have to go looking for the answers. And I think one of the biggest things too, that as from one parent to others, is to never stop being an advocate for your child. That kid is your child. That, adult is your husband, your wife, whoever it may be. Don't ever stop advocating for them when the medicines don't work, when surgery may not be an option, when all these things come down the line. Ask the questions, seek the answers, never make yourself feel like you're being an annoyance, but always be an advocate for whoever it may be.
That's awesome because, honestly, those are the best types of families to interact with, right? As a physician, you never want to lay out the options, right? But from my standpoint, I never want to lead somebody that you should absolutely do this or do that. You want to lay those options out there, and, having somebody as a parent or a patient who is able to, participate in their healthcare is very important, because we want our patients to be informed and we want them to be happy with the outcome. So advocating for them and then being involved is super, super important.
Absolutely.
So your child's still very small right now. And there's going to be, when a child has a diagnosis of epilepsy, you have to share that with them. You have to talk with probably their daycare or their school about it and make some modifications and probably come up with a seizure action plan. Have
Absolutely.
you had to go through all of that?
Oh, yes. Every single step along the way. Turner was at a wonderful daycare right near our hospital through the YMCA. We had it down to the point that if he had a seizure at school, they would log it. They would count his head drops. When this first started, they would let us know at the end of the day, how many episodes he had. As we, started to get, his medication figured out and they kind of tapered back a little bit, we didn't say, hey, you need to count how many drops. We said, as long as they're not, within an hour of one another, then we're good. But yeah, seizure action plans. We always have his emergency medication on hand. Both of his schools had it available for them. So we had, all the documentation around it, how they, if we weren't able to get there quick enough, how they dispense it. My wife and I both keep a rescue medicine in our car in case we ever were to need it. But yeah, I think just as kids grow and as you maybe move schools around, just, again, advocate for your child, ask what resources are there, but make the schools and other people aware. I will never forget, we were out somewhere and he had an episode and everybody kind of like was looking at us this weird way because you start hugging your kid and just trying to soothe them, and we had to explain to a couple of friends of ours, like, this is, our lives. This is what we do. Yeah, I think we've done everything. Creating those plans are not necessarily sometimes the easiest thing because it makes you realize what could happen along the way. But just having the confidence that, and the wherewithal and hope that it's not going to, and that you may not ever need those actual seizure action plans.
Mm-hmm. And it puts the responsibility on the parents somewhat to kind of educate the schools and educate the daycares about that.
Yeah, and I think that's just, again, going back to Turner's situation, not every type of epilepsy is your grand mal seizure.
Right.
When people think of seizures and epilepsy, they think, fall out on the ground, full grand mal style seizure. There's so many different kinds out there, and Turner's is a unique case. But, educating the school, like you said, Dr. Morehill, of what to look for, what to do, how to comfort them, if these situations ever arise, I think is huge. And I think it's one of the most important things as a parent that they can do, especially when your kid's at a school age.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think when you have a seizure action plan in place, it reduces the number of 911 calls as well. So I'm curious, Matthew, when that incident happened, and did people ask, why aren't you calling 911?
Yeah, of course, we had a couple people always being like, do we need to call an ambulance? Like, what do we need to do? And we're like, no, just calm down. Like,
Right.
I think that's the first thing is, if people don't see you as a parent panicking, then they're less likely to panic. If you know, how to handle these situations, and what you may need to do, then people are less likely to panic. Now, of course, again, going back to what I just said, there's many different kinds of epilepsy.
Right.
If somebody does have a grand mal seizure, you may need to contact 911.
Right.
But in Turner's case, his atomic head drops, once they stop, he snaps back to it and keeps going, doing what he was doing. So, I think that's one of the things, too, that just blew people away is he would have these episodes, and most of the time he'd just snap back and immediately keep going. And I mean, there were times, too, that he would have episodes and he would never stop playing. Or never stop eating, especially when he was little. I distinctly remember one time he was eating Cheerios as a kid, had an episode, his head hit his high chair, and he came up with a Cheerio in the middle of his forehead.
Oh my.
So, I mean, it's just things like that. But no, we definitely had people looking at us and being like, what do we do? What do we need to do? And I think just, again, being prepared and knowing how to handle those situations is huge.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably some growth there, too, right? Because you probably didn't start off in the initial portions of this, you didn't start off knowing what to do. You probably started off in a panic, and then over time kind of developed some comfort with it.
100%. It's scary at first. You think, I think I mentioned this earlier, we never knew if this was going to morph into a grand mal seizure, if this is going to, morph into something worse. We've been very fortunate that we've only had to come into the hospital one time because he was having them, he was cluster season. But yeah, I think 100% Dr. Morehill, it's scary at first. And just, I think going back to what I said earlier of just never being afraid to ask the questions, there were a lot of times that we would, call neurology or pediatric neurology and say, hey, this is what we're seeing. What do we do? As parents, what do we do? And they were always there to answer us. But yeah, I think you get more comfortable with it over time. And to the point that, there was one time he was with his cousins, and I'll stop that story real quick. Having family and educating your family along the way is huge. Our nieces and nephews are so comfortable with Turner's situation that Turner could be playing with them on the other side of the house, and we just hear Turner's having an episode, and we don't have to go running because they're comfortable with it. And they'll come back and they'll say, oh, he had this many head drops. Okay. And that's, a godsend to us because everybody in our family's educated on it. We've taken the time to explain it to everybody and know what to look for too. So
right. So I guess when he becomes of age, have you thought about how you have that conversation with him about epilepsy?
Yeah, I think Harley and I have discussed it a little bit. My wife is a wonderful person. She works with kids in our children's hospital on a day in, day out basis. She knows how to have these, tough conversations with kids sometimes. So I think she is a little bit more prepared than I am one day to have this conversation with him. But I think at the same time too, just making him know that he is still very much a normal kid. He's not going to be, yes, you may have this. This isn't going to slow you down at the end of the day.
Right.
May you be the next great quarterback? No. But, are you going to have a perfectly normal life along the way? Yes, absolutely. And I think, Donna Morehill, you mentioned it earlier. I think just having that perspective and that understanding of what normal may be for a single patient is important.
Right.
Turner's normal life may not be what everybody in the world sees as a normal life, but it's going to be normal to him, and it's still going to be just as special and just as caring, just as loving, and all those different things. But like I said, he may not be the next great Georgia football quarterback because he can't take a shot to the head. But I mean, it's just things like that. Like, I think you have to, as a parent, you have to sit back some days and say, how do I view my kid's normal life, and how do I make what we're living and what we're going through our normal, and going from there with it.
What advice would you give to other parents who have just learned that their child has epilepsy?
I think it's a couple things. I think, like I mentioned earlier, never stop being an advocate for your own child. Never be scared to ask questions. This is not the end. There are ways to control this. There are ways to remedy this. There are ways to give your child a very much a normal life. Don't be afraid. Hug your kid even tighter at the end of the day. And it's going to be okay. I promise. At the end of the day, there are resources out there. There are physicians out there. There are programs out there. There are all these things that are out there. Use them. Don't ever be ashamed to use them. But just know that, there's going to be days that it's going to really hit you hard. And there's going to be days that it seems okay. And then you wake up the next morning and it knocks you back down. But just know that if you're not worried about your kid, then you're doing something wrong, in my opinion. But don't let the worry consume you, I think, is one thing too.
Wow, you have such an inspirational story. I just want to know, can I put you on my contact list the next time you parent? Okay, well, I'm going to do that because I think you would be the perfect parent to talk to.
Of course.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, too, this video is evergreen, Kim. So you'll always have it. You'll always have it.
That's right.
But I guess also the other thing is there's lessons in all of these experiences that we have. But has there been some takeaway that you've gotten from this about yourself through this journey?
Yeah. I could talk all day about that, to be honest with you. It makes you really look in the mirror and I don't want to say question why it is the way that it is. But I think it makes you, it makes you realize that you were given this situation for a reason. But I think too, as a parent, one of the biggest things I've learned is not every day is going to be easy. Never be afraid to, obviously, don't leave your child alone, but, never be afraid to take 5 minutes for yourself. Never be afraid to, take an extra 5 minutes to the shower, take a 5-minute walk down the street, just walk outside and catch your breath for a few minutes, because you're going to get frustrated along the way. And you're going to question yourself, and there's going to be times you question your physicians and you question, why is nothing working? Why is, nothing seeming to help our kid or help our situation? But again, just, take those moments for yourself when you can get them. But I think too, take those moments of happiness with your child. Don't ever be afraid to, make the memories and take the Disney trip, take the beach trip, take the, trip to the zoo, those type of things. Like, create the memories with your child or your significant other or whoever's in this situation. Because in reality, you never know when those, you may not have those situations, or you may not be able to build those memories again. But two, I mean, I think building those memories, gives you a little bit of sense of normalcy. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I love that you don't let epilepsy define his life or yours. I think that's very important. And I love it that you do take time for yourself. I think sometimes parents need permission to do that.
Yeah.
And
it's hard. And it's not easy to say, I need 10 minutes, or I need to, walk away for a minute.
Yes.
And it's difficult, but I mean, I think you and your significant other, you and your partner in this, whoever it may be, whatever your situation may be, I think you just have to have that understanding that there's going to be times that it's going to be hard, and there's going to be times that you're going to need 10 minutes just to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Kim, how you said just then, epilepsy doesn't slow us down. So when Turner had his surgery, he was about 24 hours in the pediatric ICU, gets up to the floor, and 5 minutes later, after getting to the floor, goes and finds a crazy coupe and is cruising around the 5th floor of the hospital less than 36 hours after brain surgery. And we were like, oh my God, what is going on?
I love it.
He's like, I'm a kid. I went through all of this, but I'm still a kid, and I want to play now. Right now. Yes.
We looked at the nurses and we were like, can he be doing this? They were like, this isn't 100% normal, but sure, why not? Okay.
Oh gosh. You know what? I guess we talk about that too, how a lot of patients might feel that they would look after brain surgery. Is it what you expected? It sounds like it's not.
No, not at all, to be honest with you. And we joke with Dr. Wynn every time we see him now. For those of y'all that may be listening to this, Dr. Wynn has wonderful hair. And so he joked with us when we got to Turner after surgery. He was like, yeah, I didn't want to, we expected Turner's whole side of his head to be shaved, and it was just a trench where they made the incision. He said, well, I didn't want to ruin his really good hair, so we kind of laugh about that. But, as I can hear him in the other room playing, watching Bluey, I think, his hair's grown back. You can see his scar still a little bit, but, he looks like nothing ever happened.
Yeah, and kids they're resilient.
Oh my gosh.
They are, and they really do bounce back so much quicker than adults. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I've seen a post-op recovery day of like 3 days. I'm not sure exactly when he was discharged, but 3 days.
He went into surgery Wednesday morning, left the pediatric ICU Thursday around lunchtime. We were discharged the next day, that Friday, around 2:00.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's just insane. I mean, it was almost like you bring home your first newborn.
Yeah.
You put them in the car and you're like, what do we do now?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, I guess beyond the diagnosis of epilepsy, outside of your child still being a child, is there anything else you would want people to know about this process beyond epilepsy surgery, beyond the epilepsy diagnosis? Is there anything else maybe that we haven't touched on that you feel is important?
I think it just all goes back to, being an advocate for your kid or your situation. I think that's really one of the biggest things I can share as a parent that went through this is, never stop asking questions. Never stop being an advocate for your kid. But I will say one thing, as a parent, don't go trust your medical professionals. I'll say that, and don't go down a rabbit hole, the WebMD rabbit hole, or reading articles that you may not understand, or things like that, because it's going to do nothing but strike fear in you, and you're going to have more questions than when you started. But I think too, one of the biggest things is just knowing that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It may look really, really small some days, and other days it may be like you're standing at the doorway of the tunnel. But at the end of it, it's going to be okay.
Yep.
And speaking of the devil, come here, come here.
He needs his crate.
Oh, sorry, he came running in here to get his crayons.
Oh.
But yeah, I think the big thing too is, like I said, there's going to be light, and there's going to be days that the rainbow's really bright, and there's going to be days that it's in gray and black. But just know that there are other people out there that are going through the same situation, and just know that it does get better, and right. I promise you that it does get better.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of sharing your story, it takes a lot of courage to share your story. I wonder what makes this, because you seem so natural with this. Why is sharing your story so important to you?
I think just because when you look at something like epilepsy, a lot of people, I think, have bad stigmas about it and think it's something that it's not. I think too, when people think of kids with illnesses, they think of cancer, they think of all these other things, and there's so many more things that are out there. But I think too, the comfort that I have, trust me, sharing our story hasn't always been this comfortable to me. I've talked about it a lot recently. But I think because of the positive outcome that we had, it makes it a little bit easier to share, and being able to give people the peace of mind that it's going to be okay and that it's going to work out in the long run, it is really important, and I want to share our story because I think it does give people a little bit of a peace of mind that are going through this. So
Yep.
Yeah. And I think parents want to hear this story. They need to hear this story. Again, especially from someone who's experienced it.
Yeah, there is nothing more valuable than this right here.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You could spend an hour talking to your doctor, but to have someone who's lived it, their child has lived it, and then to see that you're okay and that he's running around your house and asking for crayons and listening. Is it Bluey?
Oh, we love Bluey.
I don't know this one. I think when my kids were small, it was Blue's Clues back then, but I guess they didn't want to get rid of Blue, the name. I don't know if it's related or not, but yeah, I think it's awesome.
It's all Bluey all the time nowadays. So.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Yep. Well, I have come to the end of my questions that I have typed here. Not too bad?
Absolutely not.
You did great.
Yes, you did. I knew that you would, though. I knew that you would.
This is so amazing, and I know that you probably won't get to know how many people that you have helped by doing this, but just know that there's going to be so many.
Well, thank you guys for giving me the opportunity. It's not always the easiest story to share, but it is, I think, like you said, Dr. Moorhill, it's important to share, and I think it's going to help people a lot down the road. So that's why I do it.
Well, hats off to you and Harley, and thanks to Harley for letting us borrow you for the for the last hour.
She kept peering around the corner like I'd be answering a question, and she'd come around the corner and look at me like I was saying something wrong. I was like, God.
She's not cue cards, is she?
I know. I'm shocked. I'm always shocked she didn't.
Well, very good.
Talking about me in here.
Oh, here she comes.
You're lucky I'm in my pajamas.
Oh. Tell her she's welcome back anytime. Just let us know. We're here for it. This is really, really good. Really, really good. Thank you so much. And,
you're very welcome, guys.
All right. Have a good rest of your day.
All right. See you tomorrow. See you, Kim.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.